Millionaire rescues pregnant woman, but her name revealed a shocking truth that left him breathless. The rain wasn't just falling, it was punishing the city. It was one of those torrential summer downpours that turn the asphalt into rivers of oil and debris, and the sky into a heavy, unforgiving gray. For anyone inside, nursing a hot mug of coffee, it was just an annoying drumming sound on the window. But for Julia, all that water felt like it was washing away the little hope she had left. At 24, Julia carried a weight far heavier than her age suggested. Her prominent, hard belly signaled the 8th month of a complicated pregnancy. She was huddled under the awning of a decommissioned bus stop, right off a busy stretch of Interstate 10 outside the city limits. The spot smelled of mildew and gasoline, and the cold concrete bench made her bones ache. A sharp ache that climbed her spine and settled behind her neck. "Hold tight, my love," she whispered, stroking her belly with hands smudged with soot. "Mommy will figure this out." Julia had been evicted from the cheap boarding house where she lived that very morning. The owner, a woman who had seen too much misery and lost her compassion years ago, wouldn't hear explanations. No payment, no room. Simple as that. With a beaten-up backpack containing 2 changes of clothes and her documents, Julia was thrown onto the street. Hunger was an old companion, but now, pregnant, it became a torture. Her stomach rumbled, demanding nutrients she couldn't provide. Every passing car sprayed her legs with dirty water, and with every headlight that illuminated her tired face, she extended a trembling hand. She wasn't asking for much, just enough for a slice of pizza, a sandwich, anything to make the baby stop kicking with such agitation. But the windows went up. Faces turned away. The invisibility hurt more than the cold. She felt like a ghost, watching the world of the living rush past, hurried to get to their warm homes. On the other side of that invisible barrier separating destitution from wealth was Arthur. Sitting in the back of an imported luxury sedan, the climate control kept the temperature at a pleasant 72 degrees. The interior smelled of fine leather and expensive mahogany cologne. Arthur Sterling, at 34, was the picture of success. Impeccable suit, a watch that cost more than most people's annual salary, and the command of one of the country's largest tech conglomerates. He glanced at the tablet on his lap, reviewing figures that would make any ordinary person choke. But his mind was elsewhere. There was a silence within Arthur that no amount of money could fill. "Traffic is impossible, sir," said the driver, a loyal, gray-haired man named George, checking the rearview mirror. "Looks like there was a bad accident a couple of miles ahead. Everything's backed up." Arthur sighed, putting down the tablet. He rubbed his temples, feeling that old tension headache starting up. "It's fine, George. I don't have anyone waiting for me at home anyway." The phrase came out with a bitterness he couldn't hide. And it was the plain truth. Arthur's duplex penthouse was straight out of Architectural Digest. Cold, perfect, and empty. He had women when he wanted them, friends who drank his whiskey and laughed at his jokes. But he had no one real. Arthur had built his empire upon a foundation of guilt. He fled crushing poverty at 18, promising to return for his little sister, whom he had left in a rundown state children's home after their parents died. But ambition swallowed him whole. The shame of his origins made him invent a new history for himself. The years passed, the money poured in, and the courage to go back and face what he had done never materialized. He tried to buy peace of mind with anonymous donations, but he knew, deep down, that his soul was in debt. The car crept forward a few feet and stopped again. Fate, with its firm hand, positioned the black sedan precisely in front of the bus stop where Julia shivered. Arthur looked through the tinted, bulletproof window, shielded from the outside world. The rain streamed down the glass, distorting the images, but he saw her. He saw a hunched silhouette. He saw the hands cradling the enormous belly. He saw the wet hair plastered to her face. Something clenched in Arthur's chest. It wasn't the common pity we feel for a panhandler at a traffic light. It was a punch to the gut, a sense of recognition of human fragility. He remembered his own mother, sick and poor, before she passed away. He remembered how cruel life can be to the defenseless. George, Do you have any cash on you? Arthur asked, his voice husky. I have some change, sir. Do you want me to? No. Give me what you have. And roll down the window. Sir, it's dangerous. The driver cautioned, tense. This isn't a good area, and with this rain. Roll down the window, George. Now. There was an authority in Arthur's voice that allowed no contestation. The driver obeyed, and the window slid down smoothly, letting in the deafening noise of the rain and the smell of wet asphalt. The cold air invaded the car, shattering the bubble of comfort. Arthur leaned toward the window. Hey! He called, raising his voice to overcome the storm's roar. Julia, who had been looking down, lifted her face. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying, but there was a wounded dignity in them. She saw the man in the luxury car. She saw the suit, the clean-shaven face, the serious expression. For a moment, she hesitated. Pride screamed at her not to move, but the baby kicked, reminding her of the priority. With difficulty, holding her back with one hand, she approached the curb. The gutter water soaked her already drenched sneakers. Arthur extended a thick wad of bills. They were hundreds and fifties, an amount he hadn't bothered to count, but which for her meant months of rent and food. Take it, he said, looking her in the eyes. Please go somewhere warm. Get out of this rain. Julia extended a trembling hand and took the money. Their fingers brushed. Her skin was icy cold. His was warm. Both felt the thermal shock. She clutched the notes to her chest, as if they were sacred treasure. Tears mixed with the rain on her face. Thank you, sir. Her voice was faint, hoarse. May God bless you tenfold. You saved my son's life today. Arthur felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to close the window, wanted to retreat into his security, but couldn't look away. There was something in those deep brown eyes. An ancient sadness. A melancholy he knew very well, for he saw it in the mirror every morning. Julia, in an impulse of honesty that vulnerability brings, continued to look at him. You know you have sad eyes, she said, sniffing and wiping her nose with the sleeve of her old blouse. Even with this car, with all this money, your eyes are just like my brother's. Arthur's heart skipped a beat. Time seemed to slow down. The sound of horns around them became muffled. Your brother? He repeated, his voice barely audible. Yeah, he was the only person who ever truly loved me. Julia smiled sadly, a smile that broke Arthur's heart. He looked after me like a father, but he left a long time ago. Got lost in the world. But his gaze was like yours, full of longing. Arthur felt a cold that didn't come from the rain. His hands started to sweat. Coincidence. It had to be a coincidence. The world is big. There are thousands of sad stories, thousands of siblings who part ways. He tried to convince himself, tried to maintain the composure of the unflappable CEO. He was about to tell the driver to move on. He was going to close the window and forget the woman. But a greater force, perhaps the hand of God or just the unbearable weight of his own conscience, made him ask the question that would change everything. What? He swallowed hard. What is your name? The woman adjusted the backpack on her shoulder, shielding her belly with the other hand, ready to step away and seek shelter. She paused and answered simply, Julia. Julia Valdez. Arthur's world stopped. The sound of the rain vanished completely. The car, the interstate, the driver, everything disappeared. Only that name echoed in his head like thunder. Valdez, their mother's maiden name. The name he had abandoned when he adopted the surname of the rich stepfather who never existed in his falsified documents. He looked at her face again. Now, without the filter of indifference, he saw it. He saw the shape of her chin, identical to his mother's. He saw the small scar on her left eyebrow. He remembered the day she fell off the swing at the orphanage, when she was 5, and he held her in his lap while she cried, promising that nothing bad would ever happen to her. 15 years. 15 years of running away. And here she was, pregnant, on the street, begging for change from the brother who lived in a gilded penthouse. The pain was physical. Arthur felt as if his chest would explode. He literally couldn't breathe. Mr. Sterling? Are you all right? George asked, startled by his boss's sudden pallor. Arthur didn't answer. He didn't think. He acted. In an abrupt movement, he flung open the car door. "Sir, the rain!" George shouted. Arthur ignored him. He stepped out of the car, his Italian leather shoes landing directly in a puddle of oil and mud. The rain soaked his thousands of dollars suit in seconds. He didn't feel it. He only saw Julia, who had flinched and stepped back, frightened by his sudden reaction. Arthur walked toward her, stumbling, and fell to his knees on the filthy ground of the bus stop. Julia's eyes widened, clutching the money to her chest, ready to run, thinking this rich man had gone crazy and wanted the money back. "Sir?" she called out, scared. Arthur lifted his face. Water streamed down his hair, washing away the gel, washing away the pose, washing away the lie. He looked at her with eyes overflowing with tears that mingled with the storm. "Jew!" He tried to speak, but the weeping came hard, a sob that had been trapped for a decade and a half. "Jules, my Jules!" Julia froze. No one called her that. No one except... She looked closely at him. The grown man's face, the lines of expression, the trimmed beard, but the eyes, those sad eyes. "Arthur?" she whispered, her voice fading. The backpack slipped from her shoulder and fell onto the wet ground. "Forgive me?" Arthur sobbed, kneeling at his sister's feet, hugging her legs like a shipwrecked man clinging to a lifeline. "For God's sake, forgive me. I'm a coward. I left you alone." Julia brought her hands to her mouth, shock preventing her from reasoning. The brother she waited for at the orphanage window for years, the hero of her childhood who became the ghost of her youth. He was here, rich, and she was here in destitution. The mix of emotions was overwhelming. Relief, anger, love, disbelief. But seeing that powerful man kneeling in the mud, shaking and crying like a child, Julia's heart, which despite everything never stopped being a sister's heart, spoke loudest. She bent down, struggling because of her belly, and touched his face. "It really is you?" she said, touching his wet skin. "You came back." Arthur grasped her hand and kissed it, desperately. "I will never leave you again. Never. It's over, Julia. The suffering is over." He stood up, still trembling, and steadied her. "Come on, get in the car. Now." "But, I'm all dirty, soaking wet. I'll ruin your car." "To hell with the car," Arthur shouted with a protective fierceness. "All this is trash next to you. Come on." He guided her to the back seat. George, the driver, watched the scene slack-jawed, understanding nothing, but seeing the urgency in his boss's face, he rushed to assist. Arthur helped Julia into the warm, safe environment. He got in immediately afterward, drenched, ignoring the beige leather instantly stained with mud. He threw his wet blazer onto the floor, grabbing a blanket he kept in the trunk to cover his sister. "George, head home," Arthur ordered, his voice firm but choked. "And call Dr. Peterson. Tell him I need him at my place in 30 minutes. It's a family emergency." "Family, sir?" George asked, starting the car as traffic began to move. Arthur looked at Julia, who was trembling from cold and emotion beside him. He held her hand tightly, intertwining their fingers. "Yes," Arthur replied, meeting his sister's eyes. "My sister. She's moving in with me." As the car smoothly glided onto the asphalt, moving away from that wretched bus stop, Julia rested her head on Arthur's wet shoulder. The warmth of the heater began to dry her clothes, but it was the heat of her brother's hand holding hers that made tea. He fear of the future disappear for the first time in months. They were together. Julia's life, marked by lack, now collided with Arthur's life, marked by excess. And in that silent sedan, as the city passed outside, their destinies were sealed. The past had been cruel, but the present had just given them a second chance. And Arthur swore, silently, as he looked at his sister's belly, that he would defend that chance with his life. Can you imagine reuniting with someone you love in such an extreme situation? Life throws curveballs you never expect. Arthur had all the money in the world but was miserable inside. Julia had nothing but carried the strength of survival. Now they are under the same roof. But can 15 years of hurt and secrets be erased just with an apology? Money solves hunger, but does it solve the pain of abandonment? Julia's presence in the mansion is about to awaken the envy of those who don't want to divide Arthur's inheritance. And Julia's past on the streets hides dangers Arthur knows nothing about. If you believe family is the most precious thing we have, sound off in the comments with the word family. What would you have done if you were Julia? Would you have gotten in the car? Or would pride have held you back? Let us know. Hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the continuation of this emotional story. The next part will bring a twist that will put this new union to the test. The arrival at Arthur's penthouse was a shock of reality for Julia. The private elevator opened its doors directly into a living room that was larger than any house she had ever lived in. The marble floor shone so brightly it looked like a pool of water, reflecting the city lights streaming through the massive glass windows. But despite all the grandeur, the place was cold. It looked like a museum, not a home. Julia, still wrapped in the blanket and holding her soaked sneakers to avoid staining the rug, felt tiny. The luxury was intimidating. Arthur, however, gave her no time to feel like an intruder. He dismissed the household staff who came curious to see who the visitor was and personally guided his sister to the guest room. A suite that smelled of lavender and had Egyptian cotton sheets so soft they felt like clouds. "Take a hot shower, Jules. Get those wet clothes off," Arthur said, opening the closet and grabbing one of his bathrobes, as there were no women's clothes in the house. "Dr. Peterson is on his way." On that first night, while the doctor examined Julia and confirmed her malnourishment and the risk of preterm labor due to stress, Arthur remained in the corner of the room, watching. He looked like a sentry. Guilt gnawed at him with every bone he saw protruding beneath his sister's pale skin. When the doctor prescribed absolute rest and potent vitamins, Arthur merely nodded, his jaw locked. He would buy the entire pharmacy if necessary. The days that followed were a slow and painful adaptation, but also full of tenderness. For Arthur, accustomed to running a corporate empire with an iron fist, the challenge now was domestic. He, who never had time for anything beyond meetings and corporate mergers, began arriving home earlier. He canceled business dinners to ensure Julia was eating. At first, she ate quickly, hiding pieces of bread in the pockets of her bathrobe, a sad habit of someone unsure if they would have the next meal. When Arthur noticed this, his heart broke again. One Tuesday afternoon, he sat at the table with her, held her hands, and said, his voice thick with emotion, "The pantry is full, my sister. The fridge will never be empty again. You don't need to save anything. I promise you, the hunger is over." Julia cried over the dinner table, and it was there that the barrier between the millionaire and the street woman truly began to crumble. They were back to being just Arthur and Julia, the Valdez siblings. The weeks flew by. With good food and security, Julia's belly grew, and color returned to her cheeks. The mansion, previously silent and sterile, gained life. Now there was the smell of cake baking in the afternoon, a recipe Julia salvaged from the memory of their mother. There were baby magazines scattered across the minimalist living room. There was laughter. On sleepless nights, common in the final stage of pregnancy, the two would meet in the living room, lit only by the city glow. It was during these hours that the wounds were opened to be healed. Julia told him about her years in the state home after he left. She told him about the families who returned her, about the boyfriends who promised love and delivered violence. She talked about the baby's father, a man who vanished the moment he saw the positive test. "I thought I just had bad luck, Arthur," she confessed, caressing her belly. "That I didn't deserve to be loved." Arthur, in turn, shed his armor of success. He confessed that money was an addictive drug he used to forget who he was. He spoke of the loneliness of being on top of the world and having no one to share the view with. "I built all this to prove I wasn't that poor, scared kid," he said, looking at the skyline. "But in the end, I was just running away from you, running from my responsibility." Forgiveness was not a single act but a daily construction. Every gesture of care from Arthur was a brick in that reconstruction. And the highlight of this new life happened one Saturday morning. Arthur had disappeared for a few hours and returned with a delivery truck. He ordered the office next to Julia's room to be emptied. What had been a place of cold business transformed, in a matter of days, into a sanctuary. He didn't hire famous decorators. He insisted on assembling the furniture himself. Julia sat in the armchair, laughing and giving instructions while Arthur, sweating and cursing at a complicated instruction manual, put together the white crib. When the room was ready, with walls painted a soft blue and teddy bears on the shelves, Arthur turned to his sister. He ran his hand over the empty crib, as if making a sacred vow. "Jules," he began, serious, "I wasn't there for you when we were kids. I failed as a brother. But I swear on our mother's memory that I will not fail this boy. I will be the father he doesn't have, the uncle, the godfather, the protector. Nothing bad will ever touch this child while I break." Julia hugged her brother, feeling the truth in those words. They were a family again. The past was forgiven. The future looked bright. But happiness, when it arrives too quickly for those who never had it, tends to bother those watching from the outside. Vivian Sinclair, Arthur's fiancée, was traveling through Europe when the reunion happened. She was a stunning woman from a traditional family who saw marriage to Arthur as a merger of assets, not of souls. Upon returning and finding a pregnant woman installed in the mansion, and worse, being treated like royalty, Vivian's alarm bells rang. She didn't make a scene. Vivian was intelligent and venomous as a viper. She smiled at Julia, brought expensive and inappropriate gifts for the baby, and began to observe. She saw Julia's vulnerability, the simplicity of someone who came from nothing. And she saw, above all, how Arthur had changed, focused on his sister and the nephew to come, leaving the couple's plans on the back burner. "Honey, don't you think it's strange?" Vivian began to drip her poison one night, as Arthur was having a whiskey, tired but happy. 15 years later, she appears exactly on your route, pregnant, needing everything. "It was fate, Vivian. I saw her at the bus stop," Arthur defended, "but the seed was planted." "Fate or research?" Vivian arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Nowadays, Arthur, knowing where the CEO of the biggest company in the city drives is easy, and an 8-month belly is the perfect disguise to evoke pity." Arthur denied it, irritated, but doubt is a creature that, once fed, grows quickly. Vivian knew where to strike, at Arthur's fear. The fear of being used for his money, something that had happened so many times with friends and gold diggers. The final blow came a week later. Vivian walked into Arthur's office with a yellow folder in her hand and an expression of false concern. "I didn't want to show you this, Arthur. I swear I didn't. But I hired a private investigator. For our safety." Inside the folder were printouts of WhatsApp conversations and bank statements. They were perfect forgeries. The messages showed an alleged conversation between Julia and her ex-boyfriend, dated months earlier, planning the encounter. "He drives past that highway every Friday. I'll stay there until he sees me. It's our chance to get out of poverty. He's rich. He'll fall for the repentant brother story." Arthur read it, and the blood drained from his face. His hands trembled. The words were cruel, calculating. They didn't sound like the sweet Julia who baked cakes in the afternoon. But fear, the old fear of being just a walking wallet, screamed louder. The scar of corporate distrust opened. Blinded by the pain of betrayal, Arthur stormed up the stairs. He didn't yell. His silence was worse than any shout. He found Julia in the baby's room, folding tiny clothes with a smile on her face. Seeing her brother's expression, her smile died. "What is it, Arthur? Did something happen?" Arthur threw the papers onto the crib he had personally assembled. "How long did you spend planning this, Julia?" His voice was pure ice. "Since when did you know I had money? Was it all an act? The bus stop, the rain, the hunger." Julia picked up the papers, uncomprehending. She read the fabricated messages, the sordid plans that never existed. She looked at Arthur, expecting him to laugh, to say it was a cruel joke. But his eyes, those eyes that days earlier promised eternal protection, now looked at her as if she were a monster. "Arthur, this is a lie. I never wrote this. I didn't even know if you were alive." She tried to defend herself, her voice choked with tears. "Stop lying," Arthur exploded, slamming his hand onto the dresser. "The proof is right there. Vivian traced it. You came back not for your brother, but for the vault." That accusation hurt more than any slap. It hurt more than the cold rain of that Friday. Julia looked at her brother and saw that his distrust was greater than the love they were rebuilding. Pride, the one thing the poor have a right to keep intact, swelled in her chest. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to humiliate herself to prove she wasn't a thief. If he, her own blood, could believe that so easily, then he didn't deserve her. Julia wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "You can have all the money in the world, Arthur," she said with chilling calm. "But you are still poor in spirit. Vivian showed you what she wanted you to see, and you chose to believe her. Get out," Arthur whispered, turning his back because he couldn't look at her without wanting to die. "Before I call the police." Julia took nothing he had bought. She left the new clothes, the creams, the gifts. She put on her old outfit, which had been washed and saved, grabbed her worn backpack and left. Arthur heard the front door slam. The sound echoed through the empty mansion like a gunshot. Vivian appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling discreetly, and tried to embrace him. "It was for the best, darling. She was an opportunist. We'll get through this." Arthur pulled away from her embrace, feeling sudden nausea. He had won. He had rid himself of the con artist. But, looking at the empty baby room, he felt he had just lost his soul for the second time. Far from there, night fell heavily over the city. Julia walked until she couldn't take it anymore. With the little money left in the pocket of her old pants, she managed a room in a cheap, dangerous boarding house, where the walls were thin and the smell of mildew permeated the air. She sat on the hard bed, alone. The fear returned in full force. Without the comfort of the mansion, without the security of her brother, the world seemed a terrifying place again. And then the pain came, not the pain of sadness, but a sharp, violent stab in her lower abdomen. Julia screamed, doubling over. Warm water ran down her legs. The stress, the walking, the deep sorrow, all of it took its toll. The baby was coming, prematurely. Julia tried to stand up to call for help, but another contraction threw her onto the dirty floor. She was alone. No cell phone, no money for a hospital, no one. The image of Arthur assembling the crib flashed through her mind, and she cried out in despair. "Arthur, help me!" she whispered into the void, as the pain consumed her. In the mansion, Arthur was sitting in the dark of the baby's room, holding a wool slipper. A tightness in his chest, an inexplicable anguish, made him break out in a cold sweat. He didn't know it, but at that moment, the life he had promised to protect was hanging by a thread, and the guilt would be his eternal sentence. My God, what a desperate situation. You see how one person's malice can destroy an entire family's life. Vivian played dirty, but Arthur. The fear of being tricked led him to commit the greatest injustice of his life. Now, Julia is in labor, alone and in danger, while he is trapped in his castle of lies. Will the brotherly instinct speak louder than his wounded pride? Will he discover Vivian's deception in time to save his sister and nephew, or will it be too late? Money buys comfort, but it doesn't buy trust. Arthur failed the most important test. If you think the injustice done to Julia cannot go unpunished, type justice in the comments below. What would you have done in Arthur's shoes after seeing that evidence? Would you have kicked your sister out or investigated further? Share your thoughts. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The next part will be the climax of this story, and I promise, the tears will flow, but the truth always comes out. You won't want to miss the emotional finale of Millionaire Rescues Pregnant Woman. See you in the next part. The early morning hours crept by silently in the mansion, but the noise in Arthur's head was deafening. He was sitting on the floor of the baby's room, his back against the crib he had assembled with such care. In his hands, he held the papers Vivian had given him, the proof of his sister's betrayal. He read those printed messages for the 10th time. "He's rich, he'll fall for the story." The coldness of the words violently contrasted with the memory of the warmth of Julia's hands, the way she cried upon seeing food on the table, the genuine shine in her eyes when talking about her son. Something didn't add up. Arthur closed his eyes, and a specific memory surfaced. One of the messages in the dossier was dated a Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. On that Tuesday, Arthur remembered perfectly. The power had gone out in the neighborhood due to a storm. They spent the evening by candlelight in the living room, playing cards, and Julia's cell phone was dead, uselessly charging in the kitchen. How could she have sent that detailed message at that time? The doubt, previously a seed of suspicion against his sister, now turned its focus toward his fiancée. Arthur jumped to his feet. The clock read 3 in the morning. He didn't wait for dawn. He called the head of cybersecurity at his company, a man he paid a fortune to protect his industrial secrets. "Sikera, I apologize for the hour. I need you at my house now. Bring your equipment. It's a matter of life or death." While Sikera drove over, Arthur paced back and forth. The anguish grew in his chest, a physical sensation that something terrible was happening far away. 40 minutes later, the technician was in the living room, analyzing the digital files that Vivian, in her arrogant carelessness, had left on a flash drive along with the folder. It didn't take 10 minutes. "Mr. Sterling," Sikera turned the laptop screen toward his boss. "This is amateur hour. The metadata has been altered. These conversations never existed on the app server. They were fabricated in an image editor. And the bank statements? The font used for the numbers isn't even the bank's original one. This is a crude fraud." Arthur's world collapsed for the second time that night. But now it wasn't pain. It was pure fury. And worse than the fury was absolute terror. He had kicked his pregnant sister out, penniless, in the middle of the night, based on a filthy lie. He dismissed Sikera and raced up the stairs, bursting into the guest bedroom where Vivian was sleeping peacefully, dreaming of her millionaire future. Arthur flipped on the light and violently yanked off the duvet. "Wake up," he growled. His voice was so low and dangerous that Vivian woke up trembling. "Arthur? What is it?" she asked, blinking, confused. He threw the fake folder onto her lap. "I know it's a lie. I know you forged everything. You have 5 minutes to get out of my house and out of my life. If I ever see you again, Vivian, I swear I will use every cent of my fortune to ensure you answer for identity fraud and slander in jail." Vivian tried to argue, tried to cry, tried to appeal to their future. But Arthur's gaze was that of a stranger. There was no love, no anger. There was disgust. "Get out," he repeated. "Before I forget, I was raised to be a gentleman." When the door closed behind his ex-fiancée, Arthur felt no relief. He felt panic. He was alone in the mansion, and Julia was somewhere in that vast, dangerous city. "George!" he yelled into the intercom, waking the driver who lived in the attached quarters. "Prep the car. We're driving the entire city if we have to." As the armored car sped through the deserted streets, Arthur tried calling Julia's old cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. They went to the bus station, drove around the shelters he knew. Nothing. The rain started again, thin and icy, like a bad omen. Then Arthur's cell phone rang. An unknown number. "Hello? Arthur Sterling." A feminine voice, tired and impatient, spoke on the other end. "That's me. Who is this?" "This is the reception desk at City General Hospital. A young woman was admitted to the emergency room half an hour ago. She has no ID, was delirious with fever and pain, but was clutching a crumpled business card with your name and number written on the back. She keeps calling out for her brother." Arthur's heart stopped for a second. "I'm coming. Don't let anything happen to her. I'll buy that hospital if I have to, but save my sister." The drive to the public hospital was a blur of lights and sirens. Arthur, who always obeyed the law, ordered George to run every red light. Upon arrival, the scene was chaotic. The hospital was overflowing, gurneys in the halls, the smell of ether and suffering. Arthur, in his expensive suit and desperate expression, forced his way through the crowd. He found an exhausted doctor at the entrance to the obstetrics wing. "Where is she?" "Julia Valdez." "You're the brother?" The doctor sighed, running a hand over his sweaty forehead. "The situation is critical. She arrived with extremely high blood pressure, severe preeclampsia. The stress triggered labor, but she is too weak. The baby is in fetal distress. We have to operate now, but the risk of hemorrhage is high." Arthur felt his knees buckle. "Doctor, bring the best. I'll pay for everything. Bring specialists from outside, use helicopters, whatever it takes. There's no time, Mr. Sterling. It's now or never. She needs blood and calm. She's extremely agitated, crying, asking for forgiveness. That's making her pressure worse. You need to go in there and calm her down. Now." Arthur was hastily dressed in a surgical gown and pushed into the cold, brightly lit room. Julia was there, pale as wax, covered in tubes. The heart monitor beeped at a frantic, frightening rhythm. She thrashed lightly, tears flowing toward her ears. I didn't steal, she whispered, delirious. Arthur rushed to her and held her face with both hands. Jules, look at me," he said, his voice choked but firm. Julia opened her eyes with difficulty. Seeing her brother, she tried to shrink away, expecting another accusation. "Forgive me, Arthur. I'll leave, I promise." "No," Arthur cried, resting his forehead against hers. "I'm the one asking for forgiveness, my sister. I was an idiot. I was blind. Vivian lied. Jules. She made it all up. I know you're innocent. I know you love me. Please, don't leave me alone again." His words seemed to act as a balm. The tension in Julia's body lessened. She squeezed his hand, weak, but present. You believe me?" "I believe you more than I believe myself," Arthur swore. "Now you need to be strong. Our boy needs to be born. I'm right here. I'm holding your hand and I will never let go." The doctor gave the signal. The surgery began. They were the 30 longest minutes of Arthur's life. He saw the blood, saw the urgency in the team's eyes, heard the technical terms that sounded like sentences. But he kept his eyes fixed on Julia's, whispering promises of the future, talking about the blue nursery, about walks in the park, about how happy they would be. Suddenly, the sound of suction stopped. A heavy silence filled the room. Arthur held his breath. Julia looked at the ceiling, exhausted, and then a cry, strong, piercing, full of life, a powerful set of lungs complaining about the cold of the world. "It's a boy," the nurse announced, holding up the baby, messy with vernix and blood, but pink and strong. Arthur sobbed loudly, a sound of pure relief that came from his gut. He kissed his sister's sweaty forehead. "You did it, Jules. He's here. He's beautiful." Julia smiled, a weak but radiant smile, before closing her eyes, overcome by exhaustion and sedatives. "Arthur," she murmured. "His name is Miguel. Like Dad." Arthur looked at his nephew being cleaned by the nurses and felt, for the first time in years, that his life had a real purpose. It wasn't the companies, it wasn't the millions. It was this fragile life that depended on him. Julia's recovery was slow but steady. Arthur didn't leave her side at the hospital for a single day. He worked from the visitor's chair, signed contracts in the hallway, and wore the same crumpled suit. When she was finally discharged, the return to the mansion was triumphant. There was no Vivian, no more doubt. George, the driver, wept upon seeing baby Miguel enter the car. On that first night home with the baby, Julia was nursing in the armchair of the blue nursery. Arthur entered quietly, bringing her a glass of water. "Thank you," she said. They stayed silent for a while, listening to the baby's gentle breathing. "I almost lost you both," Arthur said, looking at the floor, the shame still burning. "I let the fear of my money speak louder than the love of my own blood." How can you even look at me after I threw you out like that? Julia adjusted Miguel in her lap and looked at her brother with the wisdom of someone who had survived hell. Because forgiveness isn't about forgetting the pain, Arthur. It's about remembering that love is bigger than the mistake. We spent 15 years apart. Life has punished us enough. I won't let pride steal the time we have left. You're my brother, and today you saved us. Truly. Arthur knelt beside the armchair and kissed his sister's hand, sealing an unbreakable pact. The Valdez family was united again, and this time, no fortune or lie could separate them. Epilogue. 2 years passed. The day was sunny, a perfect contrast to that rainy night that had changed everything. In front of a newly renovated, modern building downtown, a large blue banner read, "The Phoenix Foundation, supporting families and children." A small crowd of journalists, officials, and, most importantly, community members, applauded. On the makeshift stage, Julia was giving a speech. She no longer looked like the scared girl from the highway. She wore an elegant pantsuit, her hair cut into a modern bob, and spoke with the confidence of an executive director. She had gone back to school, earned her GED and management certifications, and taken the lead of her brother's philanthropic arm. Because no one should have to choose between dignity and survival, she said into the microphone. This foundation isn't charity. It's justice. It's the extended hand that I once needed and that my brother offered me. In the front row, Arthur watched with teary eyes. In his lap, little Miguel, now 2 years old with curly hair identical to Arthur's when he was a child, clapped clumsily, shouting, "Mama! Mama!" Arthur was no longer known just as the cold CEO. Business magazines now spoke about his transformation, about how he humanized his companies and invested heavily in social causes. But he didn't care about the magazines. He looked to the side and saw George, now promoted to head of logistics for the foundation, smiling proudly. When Julia stepped off the stage, Miguel ran into her arms. Arthur joined them in a collective hug that was captured by dozens of cameras, but which for them was just an intimate moment. "You crushed it, sis," Arthur said. "We crushed it," she corrected, passing her arm through his. "You know, Arthur, sometimes I think about that rain, that bus stop. It was the worst day of my life. And the best day of mine," Arthur pleaded, picking up Miguel and kissing his nephew's plump cheek. "Because it was the day I stopped being a poor millionaire and became a truly rich man." They walked together into the foundation building, ready to cut the ribbon. The painful past had been left behind, transformed into a foundation to build the future for hundreds of other families. The rain had passed, and the sun, finally, was shining for the Valdezes. What an emotional journey, right? From rock bottom to total redemption. This story teaches us that money can build houses, but only love builds a home. And sometimes you have to lose everything to value what truly matters. Arthur had to face his worst demons to earn the title of brother. What about you? Have you ever had to forgive someone who deeply hurt you in the name of family? Or do you think some mistakes are unforgivable? To celebrate this happy ending and the strength of this union, drop the word victory in the comments. I want to see how many of you rooted for this reunion until the end. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to believe in new beginnings. See you in the next story.